The day I found Margaret Davidson standing at my gate with her clipboard and that pursed lip expression that spelled trouble, I knew my peaceful mountain life was about to get complicated. I had just returned from checking the northern boundary of my property, riding my ski due across the private trail system that wound through my 120 acres of pristine Colorado woodland near Greenwich. The morning sun was hitting the snow just right, making everything sparkle like diamonds, and I was in a damn good mood. Then I saw her Honda CR-V parked at the bottom of my driveway, and Margaret herself standing there in her puffy white jacket that made her look like an overstaid marshmallow. "Jack Fuller," she called out as I pulled up on my snowmobile, her voice carrying that particular tone of manufacturer authority that HOA board presidents seem to cultivate. "We need to talk about your violation of community standards." I killed the engine and pulled off my helmet. "Margaret, good morning to you, too. What violation are we talking about today?" She consulted her clipboard like it was holy scripture. "The Ridgeview Mountain HOA board held an emergency meeting last night. We've received multiple complaints about noise pollution from snowmobiles on the trails behind Ponderosa Ridge. The board has voted to ban all motorized recreational vehicles from operating within the community boundaries." I felt my jaw tighten. "Margaret, those trails are on my private property. They don't run through the HOA common areas at all." "Actually," she said, pushing her glasses up her nose in that annoying way she had, "if you'll refer to page 47, subsection 3 of the HOA covenant, any activity on private property that affects the peaceful enjoyment of other homeowners falls under our jurisdiction. The noise from your snowmobiles carries down to the luxury cabins on Ponderosa Ridge. Several owners have complained." I climbed off my sled and walked closer, looking at the papers she was waving at me. "Let me get this straight. You're telling me I can't ride snowmobiles on my own land because people a quarter-mile away in their fancy vacation cabins might hear an engine noise. The covenants are very clear, Jack. This community was built on principles of tranquility and natural beauty. Motorized vehicles disrupt that vision." She handed me a formal-looking letter with the HOA letterhead. "You have 72 hours to cease all snowmobile operation, or the association will begin levying daily fines of $500. I took the letter, but didn't bother reading it yet. "Those cabins on Ponderosa Ridge, Margaret, how many of them are vacation rentals?" Her lips pressed together even tighter. "That's not relevant to this discussion. I think it is because I know for a fact that you and at least 3 other board members own properties down there that you rent out for premium prices during ski season. Quiet mountain retreat, close to the slopes. All that marketing stuff. Am I wrong? The board members' investments have nothing to do with enforcing community standards." She snapped. "The decision has been made. Either comply with the HOA regulations or face the consequences." She turned on her heel and marched back to her SUV, leaving me standing there in the snow with her letter in my hand and anger building in my chest. I had bought my property 5 years ago, before most of the luxury development had started creeping up the mountainside. Back then, Ridgeview Mountain was just a collection of a few dozen modest vacation homes scattered across the slopes. I had specifically chosen land that was far enough from the main community to avoid exactly this kind of nonsense. My property was connected to the HOA by a single road, the same private road that provided the only winter access to those luxury cabins Margaret and her friends had built. The trail system I had developed was entirely on my land. I had spent 3 winters carefully mapping out routes that avoided sensitive wildlife areas and steep avalanche zones. I maintained them myself, used them for my business, giving guided snowmobile tours to tourists, and in my spare time, rode them for the pure joy of being out in the mountains. Now, Margaret was telling me I had to stop because some wealthy weekenders found the distant sound of engines unpleasant. I went inside my log cabin and actually read the letter. It was worse than I thought. The HOA was citing something called acoustic pollution standards that had apparently been added to covenants in a revision I had never been properly notified about. The fines would start at $500 per day and escalate to $2,000 per day after the first week. They could also place a lien on my property if the fines went unpaid. I spent the rest of that day on the phone with my lawyer, Tom Henderson. Tom had handled my property purchase and knew the ins and outs of the HOA situation. "Jack, I warned you when you bought that place that being technically within the HOA boundaries could cause problems down the road. Tom said over speakerphone while I made coffee. You also told me that my property rights were protected as long as I wasn't doing anything illegal or dangerous. I countered. Operating snowmobiles on my own land isn't either of those things. True, but HOAs in Colorado have pretty broad authority. Let me look at this revision they're citing. When was the last time you attended an HOA meeting? I had to think about it. Maybe 2 years ago. I stopped going when it became clear the board was just rubber stamping whatever Margaret wanted. Tom sighed. That was a mistake. They passed this revision 18 months ago. It was technically legal because they sent notice to all property owners. Did you get anything in the mail? I checked my records. Buried in a stack of junk mail and old bills, I found a single-page notice about a special meeting to discuss community acoustic standards. I had ignored it, assuming it was about lawn mowing hours or something equally trivial. They got me, I admitted. I didn't pay attention. The question is whether the covenant revision is actually enforceable against you since your property is effectively a separate parcel with limited HOA connection. Let me do some research. In the meantime, don't escalate things. Keep riding your trails if you need to, but try not to make it obvious. I didn't like that advice, but Tom was right. I needed to understand the legal situation before doing anything rash. For the next 2 days, I kept a low profile. I still rode my trails, but I did it early in the morning when most of the vacation cabin owners were probably still sleeping off their Appy ski cocktails. My snowmobile tour business had 3 trips scheduled that week, and I wasn't about to cancel them based on Margaret's power trip. On the 3rd day, things escalated. I was leading a family from Texas on a scenic tour through the high meadows when I saw a Summit County Sheriff's vehicle parked at the trailhead. Depew Chris Martinez was waiting when we returned. Jack Fuller, he asked, though he obviously knew who I was. We had met before at community events. That's me. What can I do for you, Chris? He looked uncomfortable. I've got a complaint from the Ridgeview Mountain HOA about illegal operation of motorized vehicles. They're claiming you violated a cease and desist order. The order isn't legal, I said, keeping my voice calm while my clients watched nervously. These are my trails on my property. The HOA doesn't have jurisdiction. That's not for me to decide, Chris said, but I've been asked to document the complaint. Are you currently operating a commercial snowmobile business on this property? I nodded, fully licensed and insured. All permits with the county are up to date. The HOA is claiming your commercial operation violates their covenants. They requested that the county revoke your business permit pending resolution of their complaint. That made my blood boil. They can't do that. Actually, they might be able to if the covenants are enforceable. Look, Jack, I'm just a messenger here. But you should know that Margaret Davidson has been in the sheriff's office every day this week filing complaints. She's also been talking to the county commissioners. She's got connections. After the deputy left and my clients departed with reassurances that everything was fine, I called Tom back. They're trying to shut down my business. I told him, this isn't just about noise complaints anymore. Margaret wants me gone. Tom was quiet for a moment. I've been going through the property records. Jack, did you know that the main access road to your property is technically an HOA easement? What are you talking about? That's Ridgeline Road. It's a county road. It was a county road. But 15 years ago, the county transferred maintenance responsibility to the HOA for a 3-mile section that runs through the development. The HOA has the right to control access and maintenance. Your property sits at the far end of that section. I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. Meaning what? Meaning that while they can't directly control what you do on your land, they do control how you get to your land during winter months. The alternate access route from the other side of your property is what? 12 miles of unplowed Forest Service road, impassable without serious equipment. I confirmed Tom. They can't just block my access. That's illegal. It's complicated. If they can make a case that your commercial operation is causing damage to the road or creating unsafe conditions, they might be able to restrict your access. It would be a hell of a legal fight, but in the meantime, you'd be stuck. I sat down heavily on my couch. What are my options? Fight it in court, which would take months and cost you tens of thousands in legal fees. Or try to negotiate with the HOA board. Maybe agree to limit your snowmobile use to certain hours or routes that are farther from the cabin development. I shouldn't have to negotiate my rights to use my own property. Tom, you're right. But sometimes a practical solution isn't the same as a just solution. Think about it and call me tomorrow. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Margaret and her bored cronies sitting in their luxury cabins, plotting how to force me out so their vacation rental properties would be more marketable. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Then I thought about something else, something Tom had mentioned. The HOA controlled the winter access road to my property, but that same road continued past my land and dead ended at Ponderosa Ridge, where Margaret and the other board members had their luxury cabins. In fact, my property sat right at the junction where the main road split, with one branch going to my cabin and the other winding up to Ponderosa Ridge. I got up and spread out the property survey maps on my kitchen table. The road that led to Ponderosa Ridge crossed through a corner of my land, just a small section, maybe 200 feet, where the original property lines had been drawn before the road was extended. When I had bought the property, that easement had been included in the deed. The HOA had the right to maintain and use that section of road, but the underlying land was mine. An idea began forming. Probably not a good idea, but an idea nonetheless. The next morning, I called a meeting with Tom at his office in Greenwich. I need you to research something for me. I told him. That easement for the road across my property to Ponderosa Ridge. What are the exact terms? Tom pulled up the documents on his computer. Standard access easement. The HOA has perpetual rights to maintain and use the road for access to properties beyond your parcel. Why? What if I needed to do some work on my property in that area? Construction, land improvement, that kind of thing. Tom's eyes narrowed. Jack, what are you thinking? Just theoretical. If I needed to temporarily block that section of road for legitimate property maintenance, would I have that right? Technically, yes, but you'd be required to provide reasonable notice and make arrangements for alternate access. Jack, if you're thinking about blocking the road to those cabins, that's a terrible idea. It would give the HOA ammunition to come after you even harder. Even if I was doing legitimate work on my property, the key word is legitimate.